Voices from the Past. My apologies for the gap in producing more content for the channel, but I have recently suffered a bereavement, and it's taken some time to feel at my ease once more. This small piece is a first step towards regaining the balance in my own life, and thus being able to continue this work. Consequently, rather than continue with Vulcan or the mythology of racism or anything rooted in the school of mythographology, I'm going to offer a much more personal insight about old books, words, and how they teach us something about life today. As you can see, I collect old books. Some in my library are nearly 400 years old. A few are 300 years old. There are quite a lot which are 200 years old, and in the main, everything is older than 100 years. The first thought that would strike most people is that collecting old books is an expensive hobby, and that my collection must be quite valuable. I'm sorry to disappoint you all, but other than a few exceptions, and I mean real exceptions, I have picked up these books for £2 or less. Less than $4 less than €3. Very often I can pick these books up for £1, £1.50. The most I've paid for a book was £20, and that was, for me, a real gem. The truth is that most of these books would have gone to landfill if I hadn't bought them. They have no real financial value. You may ask why. The answer is quite simple and easily understood. People who collect books for their value are looking for top condition, well-known authors, or titles and first editions, or rarity. They are collecting an asset. They are investing. They are interested in money more than they are interested in the content. My collection is all about the content. What is actually in the book and the value I attribute to the information it contains. I can say quite honestly that I have read all of my books. For me, the act of buying is not about owning, but about knowing. I'm in it for the knowledge. Again, you could ask another question. Why bother when you can Google to search for anything you want to know? The only way I can explain this properly is to show you. I'm going to demonstrate with a first example, which is a book in dreadful condition, for which I paid £1.50, and the seller probably thought he'd swapped a trip to the dustbin for a cup of coffee. Just one look at it tells you it is tattered, coverless, and covered in marks which book aficionados call foxing, that being small brown dots and stains, usually as a result of being kept in damp conditions at some time in its life. If we look at the title of the book, it starts to attract the interest if you have an inquiring mind. It's called A Dictionary of Domestic Medicine and Household Surgery and is dated 1854. Immediately springs to mind the idea of a scene where the father of a house says to mother, "Clear the dining table, Maud. Get the housemaid to sharpen the carving knife. Little Tommy needs his leg amputated." We again come across the question as to why anyone would need, let alone treasure, such a decrepit relic. Surely the science of medicine now is different to that of 167 years ago. Oddly, the answer to that proposition is yes and no. Yes, our medicine and its practice has advanced, but no, because it is quite strange, but not surprising when given thought, how the basics remain the same. But we're not gathering this book into the safety of my library to save it from our culture of consumer disability, which tells us an Apple computer is obsolete after 5 years and 40-year-old trainers are desirable as collector antiques. We're preserving it because it is an incredible reference work casting light on the sociology and history of English households and tells us much about medical thinking of the day. To appreciate this book, we need to shed ourselves of all our existing ideas of how medicine works and what healthcare means in provision, and start understanding a different culture from a different time. My books in the library are time travellers. They started their journey at publication, and they've contained their knowledge, which they've transmuted through the period of time to right here, where they appear miraculously on digital media. It's an incredible journey, and one which at the time of writing could not be conceived of. The pages of the book expose much that may not be immediately obvious when viewed from the outside. To begin with, this is not part of the general healthcare practice in Britain in the 1850s. At that time, in a society obsessed with class, this is a book for the patrician orders, a book to be found on the shelf of an established household representing a certain level of wealth and social respectability. This is a book for people with money. Those without money relied on a completely different form of medicine, probably mostly based on traditional herbal remedies and the like. Now, this is where I'm going to introduce you to one of the special things about collecting such old and seemingly redundantly obscure works. Very often, but not frequently, these old books carry just a bit more than their text into the future they set towards after being published. The first place we find something is in what is called a library plate, which in times past wealthy individuals pasted into their books to denote their superior status. A sort of personalised car number plate type of mentality. These library plates can lead us to all sorts of discoveries about the book's history. Then there are other library marks which may tell you of a more general history of the book. Next we come to inscriptions. This is a real favourite of mine. I'll give you a great example. One in the Industrial Book for Boys, 1856, in which a father writes to his son very lovingly, giving him the book as his 16th birthday present. In some way, the spirit of the 16-year-old remains intact in that particular moment, long after his old bones have turned to dust in what is now probably an unrecognised grave. From such inscriptions, it is then possible, into Google, to research further who these people are. A birthday date and the son's name gives you the chance to search the birth records, and from that discovery you can then trace a whole history of persons and their descendants. But the real gems are when you open these old books and find something left inside. These are very serious treasures. In the medical dictionary was inserted 3 prescriptions from between 1892 and 1894, 2 small letters relating to health matters, and a handwritten table entitled The Convertibility of Foods. These items of ephemera also provided an address, names of those at the address, the name of the chemist, and the signature of a doctor. What became even more fascinating was that the address was embossed onto the notepaper, thus denoting a certain sort of wealth, and that the address itself turned out to be a famous house which is now under the management of the English National Trust. The name of the house being Wordsworth House, and it is the original home of the famous poet. All of these extras do not in any way exceed the value of the text within the book itself. They merely represent an unexpected bonus and a connection to lives already lived. I could talk for hours about the text within this book, but I suspect my subscriber base would diminish rapidly if I went on and on and on about this stuff. Therefore, I intend to finish here by saying two things. I feel very much like the custodian of the last lingering memories of those lived lives, and in the keeping of my books in my library, I have something much more precious than a first edition of Alice in Wonderland. I take my responsibility to curate and preserve these voices from the past very seriously. The second thing I would like to say, and thank you to those of you who have kept with me this far, is to ask for feedback in the comments as to whether you would like me to do more about some of the books in my collection. I could do a whole video on each book very easily and talk about the history and the lives it reveals. I'm just not sure if there's a genuine interest amongst you all in this material, and whether or not I'm just pandering to my own fascinations. Please let me know about this. Now I've started back to work again on my channel, I will look to produce the next episode of Vulcan and the next instalment in the history of racism. There is also a lot of work coming down the line from the School of Mythology. You can see more on my website, and the new edition of my book, The Rules, is now out on Amazon. If any of you are interested in having a read of that, then please buy it. It all helps keep me going and keep the wolf from the door. Thanks again for your support, likes and subscriptions. I really appreciate the comments that come in, and I really appreciate my subscriber base and their interest in what it is I'm trying to do. Thank you ever so much.